Things have changed since 1915, when the KKK propaganda film The Birth of a Nation was the highest grossing film of all time. Now, in the summer of 2018, the film Black Panther is one of the highest grossing films of all time, with a predominantly black cast, and one of the biggest hits of the summer this year was Donald Glover's This Is America. Things have definitely changed since then. But a lot of people forget about literature. There's also an increase of African American literature being praised and actually being, produced in general. So one of the biggest books that come out now is Colson Whitehead's The Underground Railroad. Okay, to give a little synopsis to this book, basically it's about two slaves, Cora and Caesar, who escape their plantation known as Randall Farm, and they escape it through the Underground Railroad. But in this case, the Underground Railroad is a real underground railroad. And through this whole entire time, they are chased by the slave catcher Ridgway, who's hell-bent on catching them after failing to find Cora's mother, after she escaped years before. With the Underground Railroad, Colson Whitehead channels realism and fantasy as he confronts the past, present, and future with this novel, a novel about America.
This is America. Don't catch you slipping now. Don't catch you slipping now.
Considering that Underground Railroad is about slavery, it's easy to presume that there's a lot of aspects of the human condition viewed in this book. Some of them are just the familial relationships, especially between Cora and her mother, who left years beforehand. There's also the need just to be successful with Ridgway's character, with his only want in this world is to catch slaves, because you know what? He's good at it. He strikes the fear in multiple slaves, and it is shown throughout the book that people know him by name because of his reputation. He doesn't necessarily find joy in finding it, he's just finding joy because he's known in this world. And then there's also the aspect of imprisonment and oppression, which we will talk about later in another segment. Probably one of the most poignant aspects of this film is the aspect of escape. Escape from the past, the present, and the possible future. Escape is a very important keyword in this novel. Cora is literally escaping the plantation and escaping the freedom in this book as well, but she's also figuratively trying to escape her past, mainly that of her mother leaving her long ago, and also the many horrible things that happened to her in the plantation. As Colson Whitehead describes her in the book, she is a stray. A stray not only in the plantation meaning, but an orphan with no one to look after her, but in every sphere as well. Some years ago, she had stepped off the path of life and could no longer find a way back to the family of people. She's alone. Even though she's living in a house full of other slaves, she is mentally alone because she felt abandoned after her mother left her. So she's trying to escape that feeling of loneliness. But when Caesar comes to her, she finds solace in him, and they escape together. Going back to Ridgway for a quick second, it is also notable that he himself is trying to escape from something. He's trying to escape from boredom with his life. That's why he became a slave catcher, because he was working for his father, who was a blacksmith. But he found that boring. But when he found something that he was genuinely good at, he becomes a slave catcher, and that's all he can focus on, because that's the one thing he can do right. Even though every time we see him in the novel, he's bad at it. But he's just trying to find this escape to, basically escape from his own past as well in a weird way. While Cora's trying to literally escape her past and figuratively trying to escape her past. And both eventually do, but in different ways. Ridgway finally escapes by having Cora stop him for the last time by pushing him down the stairs into the Underground Railroad. He finally gets what he wants, but he becomes delirious and he no longer is in touch with reality. While Cora, she falls down as well, but she escapes. Like I said before, she escapes by herself through the Underground Railroad to the north. But she still is faced with the aspect of loneliness as well, because when she gets to the north, she's by herself, and there's multiple people that are trying to help her, but she just kind of brushes them off until the last person, a man that she seemingly recognizes, but they recognize the fact that each other was a former slave. That's what she recognizes. And in the end, she found solace with the fact that somebody finally understands her and that she was safe and free.
What I'm whipping up. This is America. Don't got you slipping up.
If I could compare this to any book I've read this year in school, it would have to be, weirdly enough, 1984. For example, both of these books, the main reason why I would compare them is that they're trying to tackle issues of the present through the use of going back in time to the past and looking towards the future. But both do it for different reasons. For Colson Whitehead, writing The Underground Railroad, he's trying to look at racial relationships within America. With 1984, George Orwell is looking at the powers of the government, control, oppression, and a lot of other things dealing with basically totalitarianism by looking at the future. Both tackle very similar themes as well, dealing with oppression, the use and control of language, the figurative slavery in 1984, and the literal slavery in the Underground Railroad, along with rebellion and indoctrination of children, along with betrayal and secrecy. A more key aspect with the betrayal of children, just going back on that. In the Underground Railroad, a white man, Martin, who helps Cora in the novel, tells her a story of how children in his town are actually exposing their parents as abolitionists for the Underground Railroad. And with that, their parents are actually hung in the streets along with slaves. Much like how in 1984, children can basically expose their parents as being thought criminals to the thought police, and they themselves just disappear. They're a very similar concept. Also, I guess a throwback to the thought police as well, with the night riders in North Carolina, who literally go door to door, just looking around people's houses with complete control. Kind of like how thought police basically have eyes everywhere, and they spy on all the people in Oceania without any repercussions and without any limits of their power. Besides just the world, the characters are also very similar in each novel. Let's first look at Cora and Winston Smith. Both are very detached from their worlds, as shown through the writing style. Both feel detached from their worlds because they have no control of their lives. And when you lose control of your life, you're almost detached from yourself. They're also trying to deal with their past with their mothers, with Winston actually trying to face the fact that he led to his mother's death, and Cora thinking that her own mother left her because she wanted to escape from not just slavery but her, because she felt that her mother thought she was a burden. Look at the secondary characters, with Caesar from the Underground Railroad and Julia in 1984. Julia does have a more prominent role in her novel, but both act as kind of like a spark of revolution within the main characters. They kind of kickstart the plot in a way by having the main characters rethink their lives in different ways, and actually sparking them to wanting to become free from society's shackles that were forced upon them. As for the villains, with O'Brien from 1984 and Ridgway from the Underground Railroad, both are overpowering and almost invincible characters, to the point where they're just an all-encompassing force of evil on these people. But they also seemingly have respect for the main characters as well, to the point where they actually engage in conversations, like conversations with them. But they also look down upon them because they believe that they're wrong in certain ways, with Ridgway thinking that Cora's lesser than him because of her skin color, but in return, O'Brien believes that Winston Smith is lesser than him because he's in a different social class. The symbols in each novel are also very similar. In 1984, Big Brother represents the oppression of government and the control it holds over its people. But in the Underground Railroad, that symbol is liberty, oddly enough. But this is because Cora can never truly achieve liberty because of the color of her skin. In other words, America was her warden. There is one key difference between the novels. In the Underground Railroad, it ends on a more hopeful note than 1984, with Cora actually escaping to the north through the Underground Railroad and defeating Ridgway. As for 1984, however, there is no hopeful ending, and Winston Smith actually succumbs to O'Brien's torture, and it didn't even matter because he dies in the end. And basically, he was dead when he bought that journal in the beginning of the book.
On my Kodak. Ooh, black. Ooh, know that. Yeah, know that.
It is known that Colson Whitehead wrote this book in reaction to today's racial politics. But he also wrote this book based on the fact that he became a parent, and many of the themes from the book comes from his own fears of being a parent. While he is talking about the present, he is looking through it through the past. And it's actually easier to understand the present if we look to the past or the future, as we saw with 1984. To basically answer the question why we study literature, we study it because, well, we're trying to learn from other people, but we're trying to learn what other people are like. We're trying to learn how other people think, how they react to things. It's like making a connection with somebody, but it's not necessarily with the author. I mean, yes, the author wrote this, but they're not really writing about themselves. Sometimes they are, but a lot of time, what they are writing about is almost universal. Other people go through these same issues. And with the character of Cora, she feels imprisoned. And by reading about Cora, we're also reading about the slaves from the past and how they felt, and what they had to go through, and what they had to do to escape from their past. In the end, after reading the book, The Underground Railroad, I found that it's not what story you tell that is important. It is about who the story is about that matters.
This is America. Don't catch you slipping now.
I guess a little review of the book. I liked it. I thought it was a very interesting book, and I believe it is a very important book to read. I did find the language to be tedious, much like 1984, because of how detached it is from the world. But it's actually, that adds to a sense of detachment with the characters as well. I'm not a huge fan of that style, so that's why I didn't really like it. But I found the characters, especially Cora and Ridgway and Sam, very intriguing. But I found the world also a little bit underdeveloped, because I kind of wish we got to see more states in the Underground Railroad, because it leaves you kind of wondering, because they talk about there's one in each state, but you only get to see 5 of them. So I kind of wish there was more to it. I just wish there was more world building to this novel, and I wish it was less tedious. Otherwise, I give it a solid 3 out of 5.